Okay, good morning. I am here with Valli, and you are probably one of the more interesting people I think I've had on here uh, in my most recent past, because as I understand, you're not only working with students and counseling and all of the mental health and sociological issues, but you're involved in some interesting programs dealing with things like mindfulness. You're working with one of the other professors on campus in one of our innovation communities. Before we dive into that wonderful list of things, can you tell us about you? We were just meeting. What should I know about you?
Sure, Bill. Like you introduced, my name is Valli. I am an assistant professor at the Clinical Mental Health Counseling program at SOU. And what we do there is train students at a master's level to work with community members, college students as licensed professional counselors. Um, One of the things that really shapes my identity as a counselor educator, as a researcher, is my personal immigrant background. So I came to the US about 6 years ago as an international student, and I came from India. So that's where I grew up. That's where I got my school education, my college education before I moved here for higher studies. So this transnational, transcultural perspective really shapes how I view mental health, how I view community, and how I view wellness. So that has been an integral part of what I teach. So when I teach my students here at SOU, I'm really intentional about offering examples not just from our community at the Rogue Valley, but also across the world. And yeah, it is this transnational, transcultural perspective that got me in touch with Dr. Paul Condon at the psychology department and started off our research, which is well under its way. Yeah.
Wonderful. I see on your vitae that you like to hike and you like to run and that type of thing. So you're an outdoors person?
Definitely, and it's very easy to be one in the Rogue Valley in
It
Oregon.
is.
Right? It's
Yes.
beautiful, gorgeous. A lot of we talked about. We will probably expand more on this on mindfulness, on self compassion, hiking, and spending time with the mountains, the trees, the animals, and the birds. Is really an active practice in expanding our sense of compassion, expanding our sense of self. Who all includes in this tight circle of what I view as myself. Is it just me, or is it my dog? Is it my community members? Is it the trees, the mountains? So outdoors is a wonderful way for me to extend my compassion bandwidth.
Outstanding. Now, I've done some traveling about the world, and I will have to say that I believe in other countries and other cultures, the views of mental health and what constitutes mental health and how we approach the idea of just overall wellness is different than here in the United States. What Let's talk a little bit about COVID before we get into the mindfulness, because I know we're doing a lot of things here just with our programs and our things working with faculty to help the growing feeling of isolation, or this feeling that I'm not connected, that I'm just stuck in my home, and uh, there's the giant disconnect between being on campus and seeing hundreds of people each day versus I'm going to walk down to the refrigerator and get a bottle of water. Uh, how has that impacted both faculty and students in the work that you have done?
Definitely. So it has had a dramatic impact on how we go about our life, just as you described. So one of the things we demand of our students, we invite from our students, is a lot of introspection, a lot of examination of who they are as they are training to become counselors. One of the ways in which we are able to sustain this really deep, demanding, ongoing introspection for 2 years at least is from a cohort model, a sense of community that the faculty are able to offer to the students, and the students are able to offer to each other throughout the course of this 2 years. But what COVID did for me as a faculty, and then what I'm hearing from my advisees, from my students, is really disturb that idea of community and make us pause and rethink how we can leverage that once again. So when I give multiple assignments as an instructor, or when I invite vulnerable introspection and disclosure in classroom, I have to be extra sensitive that these are students who go through 6 hours of classes on their laptop, shut it, and then they have only their room to face. So a lot of time now in my teaching is spent on self-care, is spent on community building. So when I serve as an instructor for supervision classes, the first 20 minutes of the class is spent on a self-care practice where one student volunteers and initiates and guides us through any kind of a mindful moment or a self-care moment. Sometimes it's more introspective, like a breathing exercise, a journaling exercise. Other times it's sitting together watching a funny video and having a laugh together.
Mhm.
So those are some ways in which my pedagogic approach, my teaching style has had to intentionally change. Pre-COVID, I could do a brief check-in for 5 minutes and trust that the breaks that I give between classes, when I see students in the hallway, would be sufficient to sustain that sense of community, that sense of attachment. It's not the case. We don't meet in hallways, we don't share updates, we don't get to chat with each other. So giving breakout rooms and not just sitting with them throughout, but allowing students to talk to each other, giving times for unstructured communication to happen, has become really critical in making somewhat of a dent in creating that community for our students. So it's been tough, it's really been tough.
How do you feel it's going? How do you feel? Are you able to land the necessary things to pull students together or to help students stay focused, or even with your coworkers working within the faculty? Uh, and also, do you have any suggestions that you might want to share for those of us wandering the halls, arguing with the refrigerator, things like that?
Yeah, to start with the first part of your question, personally, my philosophy right now is balancing between delivering the content, facilitating training, while allowing students to be themselves. This idea of trauma informed teaching has become very salient at this point, very obvious. These are students who play multiple roles outside of their current role as counselors in training. Many of them are actively losing family members, community members to natural disasters like the fire we had last year, to COVID, to racial tensions, are worrying about deportation of their family, community members, and their clients. So I have to be very mindful, very respectful of that. So some are days when a handful of my students don't want to turn on the video, don't want to verbally participate, and I think I need to respect that. And I've come to respect that. I've come to appreciate that and create space for that. So some days learning could be turning on Zoom, watching everybody's faces, and just letting myself be as a student. And that is okay for me. That is okay as long as I later check back in with the student. Are you fine? Is there something I can support you with? Are there resources I can direct you to? And it's a symbiotic process. The students have been appreciative of that, communicative about that, while others are thriving. Zoom is allowing them to take care of their children, take care of their partner, take care of their parent, while still being a student, so they don't have to worry about commute or getting a sitter or something. So really allowing this organic response to emerge and creating space for that. My summer classes, I know that many of my students have their kids sitting on their lap while we discuss family counseling theories, and that's not just okay, but that's invited, that's celebrated, because that tells us that we are not just one thing, we are many things.
So you're wrapping up the new approach in the process, and that sounds very cool. We started heading into mindfulness, and I pulled you back, but it's a fascinating topic for me. So let's take a deep dive into that. Let's pretend I've never heard the concept. What do you mean when you say you want to promote mindfulness and the things that are connected with it? Help me understand that, and it sounds very interesting from the work I've seen you folks doing.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Bill. I'll start off by saying that I am no expert in mindfulness, unlike Dr. Paul Condon. I am more of a practitioner as opposed to a researcher when it comes to mindfulness. But in everyday communication, mindfulness refers to recognizing we have a mind and recognizing that it is up to various antics at each given moment. And many of us are led to believe, led to consume the idea that mindfulness is the key to happiness, mindfulness is the key to uh, self celebration, mindfulness is the key to peace, while those secondary consequences may or may not happen. Mindfulness is about recognizing even that very expectation that we have, that I want something out of it, that this moment is not good enough just the way it is. It has to be attached to a consequence or a reward or a change, so to speak. So, in using a concrete example, mindfulness would be recognizing that right now I'm speaking to you, Bill, and that's all I need to be at. That's where I need to be at. I don't need to think about um, what's going to happen for lunch today. Has the student responded to an email? And when that mind does go into those places, inviting it back to this present moment with some compassion. So, recognizing that our mind will inevitably go to moments beyond this present moment.
Mhm.
When it does, not hating ourselves, not judging ourselves, but inviting it back to this present moment, using our breath, using our surroundings, using other senses. But yeah,
So staying focused in the moment, I guess, is what I'm hearing,
yes.
and giving yourself permission to make the mistake and
Mhm.
stop thinking about the editing process of this video, but let's focus on the moments we're spending together and the information we're exchanging.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate you using the word information. If you think about it from an information processing perspective, how can we ever make effective decisions if we are not even in the present moment? So if my input is already contaminated by what I am thinking about something that's happened in the past, what I'm thinking about what's going to happen in the future, what I'm thinking about what's happening in the next room, I cannot effectively make decisions in this moment because I've not even absorbed all the possible information from this moment. And to allow ourselves to be better responders, more spontaneous, more in this moment, mindfulness allows us to give ourselves the permission to be here and trust that being here is sufficient to go to the next step.
Now, I know you're doing work on this. Are there classes? Are there like drop-ins, or is it a formal class? Let's say I was interested in this and I wanted to find out more. What is the next step? How would I, who, how, when, that type of thing.
Sure, there are many mindfulness, and I don't want to use mindfulness and self compassion interchangeably. They do mean two different things while they can support each other. So, there are many mindfulness and sustainable compassion workshops in our community and across our country. One of the most um, thorough, absolutely thorough programs for mindfulness is the MBSR, or Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. Although this program was developed in the East Coast in a very, very intensive training institute, this program is actually available for all of us as an 8-week workshop free of cost. So I can share that link with you, Bill, for those of us who are interested in it. But it's a self-paced approach to coming back to our body, coming back to our breath, and being better decision makers, more efficient information processors, if that's a language that's more relatable for us. Um, so programs like these, more intense programs like these are available, but even shorter programs, something that I tried to do when COVID really hit us, and I ended up being on Zoom for 12 hours a day as opposed to
Yes.
2 or 3 hours a day as a faculty,
Right.
is to take mindful breaks. Sometimes it is just a 2-minute break between my two meetings. Is once this meeting gets over, I go sit in my mindful corner where I don't have these thousands of distraction, and I put the timer and just try to focus on my breath. And there is no wrong way to do mindfulness. We all think there is a right way and we will never get it. But mindfulness is even recognizing my mind is constantly asking this question: am I doing this right? Am I
Hmm.
supposed to be doing something else? Can I check that email in this 2 minutes instead of spending time with my breath? So, as long as I'm becoming aware of all these um, monkey thoughts, that is still mindfulness because I'm aware of this moment. So it could range from a 2-minute exercise between these multiple Zoom thing that we are doing, all the way to an 8-week intentional course that we attempt at. So there's something for everyone, so to speak.
Well, yes, please do share the link after we finish, and I'll include it with the program. I think that would be very useful. Anything else on the activities you're doing that you'd like to share? I would like to find out a little bit about the path to SOU. You mentioned you came to this country and you did some work, and what brought you to SOU. But let's kind of finish up with what we were talking. This is an important topic, and I want to give it the respect it needs.
Absolutely. So, what we did specifically in our research, Dr. Paul Condon has a ton of training and background in sustainable compassion, which is how can I be in this present moment, which is the mindfulness component, and offer compassion to myself with the idea that I cannot offer something to others that I haven't offered to myself first. So, if we talk about a compassionate community, a compassionate society, it has to begin with ourselves. Can I offer compassion to the pockets within me that have been judged, that have been censored, that have been manipulated because it doesn't fit the version of what a society needs from me? So, my interest in this research came from the perspective of a pedagogist or somebody who's committed to improving teaching approaches. So we put our two interests together on how can we facilitate educators' compassion to themselves so that they're able to offer this compassion to their students. So we did this long training to the faculty members. We actually opened this up to anybody at SOU, faculty and staff at SOU.
And had quite the good turnout, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Really huge turnout. And I think at least 12 to 15 of them attended every single meeting, or maybe missed one or two, but attend had a very high attendance rate. This happened on a Thursday afternoon. We understand schedules don't work out, but many made this a priority. And what we did for our research itself is interviewed each faculty who attended at least, I think, 5 or 6 of the 8 or 9 sessions, and asked them how this impacted their teaching approaches. How did sustainable compassion practice impact how they showed up as instructors on Zoom? Because that's our context. And we recorded their interviews, of course, with their permission. This is an IRB approved study. So the ethics of it has been looked into. The interview is then transcribed, which is made into like a written format of this interview. And then we code it as researchers to find out what are some common ways in which sustainable compassion may have impacted how educators show up in classrooms. One specific example that comes up to my mind is one participant disclosed that SCT allowed them to be more comfortable with silence in classroom. So the instructor would pose question, allow for maybe pre-training, they would have 1 or 2 second silence, maybe they would become a little uncomfortable and then fill it up with their own response and then move to the next content, which is completely understandable. It's very difficult to read cues on Zoom. But with SCT training, this participant disclosed that they were able to wait longer, be comfortable with the silence, and trust that students are working through this complex information. And the participant talked about how students who typically don't talk in classrooms responded much better and more silence was allowed for them. And how they connected it with sustainable compassion is recognizing we all process information in various ways and various styles. And classroom can be space not just for our more verbal processors, but also for our more internal processors. So that is just one example among many that we got. And hopefully we'll find the commonalities and publish it for other educators to practice.
So this is going to be available as a study, and a person could read this if that was something of interest.
That's our hope.
Great.
Mhm.
Great. And I hope you'll keep me informed when this is available, and we'll include it in our commons section where we share information and resources. I think that's very useful.
Definitely. Yeah.
Very good. Well, let's talk a little bit about the road to SOU, and perhaps the two questions I always like to ask. It sounds like you're doing now what you'd like to be doing. If there was a goal at SOU you'd like to meet, what do you see in the next 5 years for what's going to be happening within your department and your world? Just kind of a general question, but it gives you some space to explore.
Sure. So next 5 years, yeah. So we are seeing there is an increased need for mental health counselors in the area. In fact, mental health counseling is one of the fastest growing jobs in the country, including, of course, our own state. What this means is we have to be more responsible, more intentional about who we are inviting into the program, how we are training, and who we are allowing to graduate from the program. Because these are students who are going to be seeing clients who have had a history of being battered, clients who are navigating through addiction concerns, clients who are really dealing with chronic grief, chronic pain, chronic depression. So there is a heightened sense of responsibility, a sense of dedication to the mental health profession, and ensuring that we are appropriately training our students. So over the next 5 years, we do see our students moving more into the community, having an even more dramatic impact, and hopefully also inviting students not just from California, Oregon, Washington region, but also from across the country, maybe even across the world. We have had quite a few international applicants to our program.
Good, good, good.
Yeah, maybe next term we'll see um, international applicants in the program enrolled. So we are seeing that the value of our accredited counseling program is going beyond the immediate region and inviting students from various parts. And we hope to continue that.
I would hope to see some of the different philosophies brought in by different countries and different cultures included in the broth or the melting pot, if you would, because a new approach, not always doing, well, we can't keep doing the same thing over and over and hoping for a different outcome, because that's, I think it was Einstein who said that's insanity.
Right.
Yeah. I also noticed that you had women's issues and gender studies and that type of training and as an interest. Is there anything you'd like to share with us? I think we're starting to, it's like turning an ocean liner to change attitude and change uh, perceptions and such. But anything you'd like to share on the topic of gender equality and gender bias and things like that?
Absolutely. So that is my primary research. The research I do identify as a feminist researcher. And what that means is that I do research on the lived experiences of women, but it doesn't just mean I research on women. A feminist researcher means not just whose stories I listen to, but how I listen to it. A feminist researcher should, ideally, be creating research as a co-constructed approach as opposed to here is 5 questionnaires completed and we'll take care of the rest. So that is a more colonial mindset of let me extract the data from you and that's it. That's the last you hear of me.
Bye.
So we try to do more of a feminist researcher. That's something we are doing in Sustainable Compassion too, where all our participants get authorship in the paper. So we don't just extract their stories, put a pseudonym, and then forget about them. They are ownership of their stories. They own their background. They own their narrative. So in all right, they should have ownership of the paper too. So all participants who share their stories in Sustainable Compassion, because it is a feminist research, will also serve as authors and will have their name in this peer-reviewed paper when it comes to publication. I am also an intersectional researcher. And what that means is when I look at the experience of, say, women, for instance, I try to look at what are other intersecting identities, such as identities as a result of their race, their age, their immigration status, their ability status, and so on. So, one line of research that I am very actively engaged is on the mental health experiences of Asian women. With all that going on in our country and has happened in our country,
Exactly.
Asian women are very invisible, and also extremely visible. So, hyper visibilized for their all this misconstrued stereotypes about their sexuality
Right.
and their objectification, and also immediately invisibilized when it comes to seeing them as dignified, independent human beings. So, as somebody with a background in women and gender studies, as a feminist researcher, as an intersectional researcher, I do look at how mental health training right now does not appropriately meet the needs of Asian women. And what are some things that counselors and counsel educators should and could do to better respond to the needs of this community?
Okay. Very good. Well, let's take a look at the road to SOU, and then I know you have a very busy day, and I appreciate you taking time to join me. Uh, Give you a final shot of anything that I may have not dealt with in depth. So, what? How did you? It sounds like you've had an interesting path. How
Mm.
did you end up in our little valley? I think it's very cool.
I do.
Glad you're here.
Oh yeah, thank you. So I wanted to be at a teaching institution and at a mental health counseling institution when I was finishing up my PhD. So um, when I came to SOU for my interview, I really liked the the message, the sentiment that was communicated to me. It's a small department. We are a faculty of 4, and we are very intimately connected in each other's life. We go ahead, support each other, not just in moments of crisis, but just every day. I know I could text one of my colleagues today and just chat for an hour and not have to say I had this is my agenda.
Hmm.
Very strong sense of community, very strong sense of camaraderie. And I sensed that when I went in. I was immediately put to ease, asked to just be myself and not be in this performative mode of as an interviewee. And I appreciate that authenticity. You know, that's something we strive for as counselors, but sometimes it's not seen in practice. But I got to see that in practice at SOU. Another reason that really brought me to it, the institution, is its explicit focus on teaching. I love spending time with my students. I love teaching them, learning with them. And I get to do that at SOU. I get to teach 3 courses a term, supervise them, be at the community, be a counselor, and also be a researcher. So it's like I get to have all of my 3 wishes granted and get paid for it. So
Getting paid for doing what you like, that's a very good idea. That's
yeah, yeah. So it is really fun for me to go start my day and know that I'm going to be playing many different roles and no 2 days look alike, which is not something many educators can say that about their life. Yeah.
Exactly. I want to thank you for coming in today, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you're doing and sharing the information with us. Is there any final point you'd like to make, or have we pretty well checked everything off?
No, I feel very excited to be at SOU, be at the community. I feel really, really welcomed, supported at a department level, at a program level, and of course at a community level. So this initiative of slowing down, listening to faculty for their own insights is also another reason why I absolutely love SOU. So thanks for your work, Bill, and your
Oh,
team's work.
my goodness, thank you so much. Have a lovely day, and please stay safe out there.
Thank you. You too.